And I want to start with this Pat McAfee situation. Pat McAfee versus Washington State, because this just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And as somebody that worked at ESPN, I understand the grind and I understand the professional standard that goes into everything they do at ESPN. And Pat McAfee attacking Washington State on College Game Day, which has essentially lit the world on fire. All about, I think it's 292 consecutive College Game Day shows where a Washington State flag has made an appearance. And I don't know what the rub with Pat McAfee and Washington State is. But, Jake, I'm pretty sure this is a bad look for ESPN.
Yeah, and I think it's tough because College Game Day has for a long time, for certainly as long as I've been alive, has been a staple of college football and a staple of that Saturday morning sort of routine, and it's kind of built into what you do on Saturdays. You're in the fall. It's chilly outside. You got the hoodie on. Game day's on the TV. You're figuring out what you're going to make for food. Like, it's just part of what we do as fans. And I think, the Pat McAfee experience, let's say, at ESPN so far has been an interesting one. I do think overall, up until this point, it had been pretty good for ESPN. I think he had brought this young energy that I think the network really needed. But right now, I think the trouble is that Pat is struggling to find the balance between professional ESPN, high quality feel and what he does on his show on the YouTube side. And I think this is truly the discussion. Everyone thinks, okay, well, if you do a show on YouTube, that automatically means it's a little looser, it's a little less professional, it's a little more casual. And with Pat's style, I think that's kind of where they like to be. They like it to feel like 4 or 5 guys just sitting around a table chilling and talking sports. But that's not what Game Day's been. And I think we missed that certain edge that Game Day has brought over the years.
College Game Day is not bro talk. That's what it's not. And I think if you've watched this show for any amount of time, you know that I am a big Pat McAfee fan. I like his show. I try to watch his show every day. I mean, with Aaron Rodgers and Nick Saban and an all-star list of guests every day on that show, I mean, I think it's must-watch for sports fans. But I understand the tank tops and curse words and, the bro sports talk vibe does not necessarily resonate with a lot of people. And now this thing with Washington State and Pat McAfee, and the struggle that I have is Washington State, in my mind, is always the underdog. And a lot of it is no fault of their own. I think Washington State, whether it's this Pac-2 situation, whether it is trying to figure out how to, to keep D1 status, like they just perpetually find themselves running uphill. And I think when you're College Game Day, your job is not to pile on misery to people who already have it. Your job is to talk football and get us ready for a big day of college football. And piling on Washington State, who does largely a lot of things on the fields and courts of athletic competition very well. Say what you want about Kirk Schultz as a sports administrator. I get their debt issues. I get the roller cock situation. Totally understand that. Mm-hmm. But what good does it do for arguably ESPN's most high visual talent in a guy like Pat McAfee, who has more airtime on ESPN than any other personality at the network now? What good does it do for Pat McAfee to completely alienate Washington State, who has got great fans that turn out at games, that turn on TVs, that spend money, that support the program? I don't understand what the thought process was in a guy in Pat McAfee, who I think is one of the high bars and one of the great examples of how to be successful as a sports personality in 2023. I think this is a massive, massive mistake, alienating one of the most passionate fan bases in the Pac-12, and frankly, one of the fan bases that turns on the TV to watch sports. One of the fan bases, Pat, that watches your show. This is a huge mistake from Pat McAfee, And we're not the only ones saying it. Obviously, Washington State has a lot of alumni, including Ryan Leaf, who did not take kindly to what Pat McAfee said.
Yeah, the Cougs had a chance this weekend to do something really special. College Game Day was always a show that celebrated college football.
The flag, too. The Washington
They always
State
have.
flag, always.
They've always been a show that celebrates college football. Instead, they chose to make it a joke because Washington State and Oregon State, unfortunately, don't have a conference. And it is the no one wants us bowl. But to watch Lee say it and then go like that, and McAfee just laugh and make it a joke, that's the problem. You had an opportunity to celebrate two teams that are going through incredible adversity. And both those coaching staffs have got these 18 to 23-year-olds bought into something, and they go out and they play their tails off, and they're both ranked. No one wants us bowl. And sure enough, that's how you celebrate them instead of making it a joke. And that was my only thing that I had to say. I didn't have a fault. I've known Kirk Street forever. College Game Day's been an institution in my family and everything like that. You just had an opportunity. You fell short, just like I did a bunch of times in my life. And I feel like I'm comfortable enough to call you out on.
Wow. Well said. And I had the great fortune of working with Ryan Leaf during my time at ESPN. And I think he is one of the most passionate supporters of Washington State. I think it's shocking that Pat did this. Like, I think this is a huge mistake. I know that ESPN has spoken to Pat McAfee about this, or at least I heard that they have. I just, now I don't know how you fix this, because you're invested in this guy.
Yeah.
And by some reports, it's $50 million a year that ESPN is paying him. Like, you're invested in this guy. He's out front. I think this is a real mess for ESPN. Yeah,
and you know, the question about what was the thought process. Well, I don't think there was a thought process, and I think that's both the best thing about Pat's show and the worst part, right? I mean, Pat produces great moments on his show because he's in the moment and he thrives by just, hey, what did this person say? How can I react? Right? I mean, that's not a criticism. I truly believe that's what makes his show great. When those guys have a moment on that show, or the Aaron Rodgers stuff, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Right? Like, in the moment stuff with Pat McAfee is what makes the show great. But at the same time, it has its downsides. And I think that this was always going to be the challenge with Pat. And it is a mess for ESPN right now, having to figure out, okay, you know, how do we get Pat McAfee to be OG Pat McAfee when he's doing his show on our network and then on his channel, obviously. But then how do we get that same guy to reel it in a little bit and to play more within the ESPN parameters on game day? Because that's the challenge. And I think Pat McAfee understands, and probably, you know, and again, speculating, but probably has a pretty healthy like of himself and a healthy like of the following he's created.
I mean, I would think so.
And I respect that, but ultimately, like, you're never bulletproof. And I think that, you know, okay, this is the first time something like this has happened involving Pat on ESPN on College Game Day. Okay, first time. If it never happens again, nothing will ever happen to Pat. But I think if there continues to be issues, then I think you're forcing ESPN's hand. Like, your point.
But you're not a Pat McAfee guy. Like, you don't, and I'm not trying to speak for you. I don't feel like you like watching his show. I think you would far rather watch Jim Rome than Pat McAfee, and most days we do. Like, you're like, I mean, I don't get the general feeling that do you want him on game day? Like, do you like him on game day? Like,
I mean, I like the energy that he brings to game day, but I don't like him making an ass of himself on game day. Like, game day, in my opinion, was desperate for a new energetic face. That's just my opinion, though. That you may disagree with that, but I think game day needed something. It wasn't good enough that they were just in this place and you had a couple of marquee names talking about college football across the board, including the location that they were at. That they had been doing it for so long that it kind of, in my opinion, lost that specialness that made you turn it on. Like,
sure,
you had it on, but it wasn't like, my God, I got to turn game day on today. You just relied on it. You knew what was going to be on. Pat I thought it was a genius idea to bring Pat in to do Game Day because Pat McAfee brings a younger audience. Game Day was already this show that, while yes, was professional, brought an edge, talk college football, X's and O's, also had a lot of fun with Lee Corso and mascot heads and all the different things that they would do with Desmond Howard. And like, we know what Game Day it is. But the thing before Pat is Game Day was safe for ESPN. Now Pat's removed that layer because of what he said about Washington State. And so it's this...
And it really was about Washington State fans. Like what you're seeing on the screen, like he's going after Washington State fans. Like anything that has happened to Washington State, like that, like their fan base has any fault in it.
Yeah.
And Washington State fan watches television. Like they have great TV ratings. They're having a great season. They're a great story in the Pac-12. Like, did you guys see this letter that Pat Chun, the athletic director, wrote to the Division I Council? He's asking for, this is a letter from Pat Chun, the athletic director at Washington State. He is asking for help from the D1 Council. If you read the last paragraph, spirit of teamwork and camaraderie that is underscored throughout college athletics. As this process unfolds, we ask for compassion, understanding, and flexibility in navigating NCAA governance structure and potential legislative waivers.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're in a no-win situation. We talked about this with Oregon State yesterday. We've talked about this with Washington State. Why Pat McAfee chose to go after Washington State fans, I don't understand it.
And again, 100% my opinion, just my observations on his show. Disagree if you like. Pat McAfee is never someone who talks in detail about anything they talk about on his show. That's just my opinion. Pat himself. Now, the other guys on his show, and they do a great job of this, they find an awesome balance. Pat talks in a lot of generalities about the topics they're discussing. And then the other guys on the show, the hammer as they call it, will bring in the detail, will bring in the finite. And I think it's brilliant. The problem is when you want to talk about realignment, when you want to talk about expansion, or even a sniff of that were to come up on game day, what's the first thing that a guy like Pat's going to go to? Well, he's going to go to what he knows
the
instinctually.
easy button. The easy button.
I think that's where Pat got in trouble on this because, again, it is a sensitive subject if you're a Washington State or Oregon State fan. It just is. And you are
Naturally.
not at fault. Of course, right? And so I don't, there wasn't a strategy here. The question we should be asking is, how has ESPN not got a tighter grip on Pat McAfee when it comes to game day? That's what we need to be asking.
That's a great question.
The Pat McAfee show was one thing. Okay, hey, it's your show. You know the rules. You know when you're on our network and when you're just on your YouTube channel. Okay, great. That's pretty straightforward. But game day was also pretty straightforward until you decided to go scorched earth on Washington State fans. Because in my opinion, Pat is not, based on the lack of conversation about it and then making comments like this, I'm not confident that Pat McAfee could have an intelligent, in-depth conversation about Washington State's position in college football realignment and expansion right now if he walked in the room.
Yeah, I wish...
And I think because of that, that's why you get things like this.
And I wish we could play the bite. We can't. Obviously, it's copyrighted by ESPN. They own it.
Yeah.
But it was essentially a joke with Lee Corso, and it was poorly executed. And it was in reference to the fact that Washington State has had somebody fly their flag at college game day, and it's usually this one particular fan, 292 consecutive college game day shows. I mean, think about how long that is. That the Washington State flag has been somewhere in that show.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable.
Yeah, we want to criticize that. We want to make fun of that. And it's like, dude, so there's somebody going around the country with you making a Washington State flag appearance?
It's a fan. It's one Washington State fan, and they did a story on ESPN on it. That's the part that's so mind-numbing. They did a great feature piece on it. And this guy goes to all the different locations, drives across the country, takes a flag with him, and makes sure the Washington State flag is there. And Pat went on this rant about like all the way back to 2009 when Washington State was not good. And the thing that came to my mind, and I watched it when this happened, and the thing I was thinking is, who the fuck cares about, excuse my French, who cares about 2009, man? That was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Who cares? Like, why are you bringing up, why are you making it personal and taking a jab at them? Yeah. And then, of course, the great radio wizard from the Northwest had to get involved and wrote a column about Pat McAfee. Again this week, McAfee went after the kid picked last on the playground. So wait, did you just insult Washington State? Is that what you did, John Canzano, by calling them the kid that got picked last on the playground? Here, then, this is exactly what's wrong with John Canzano. On ESPN College Game Day, he said, "Shut up, Washington State." Then a couple of days later, he laid into the Cougars on his own show, insisting Washington State should be grateful for the exposure it gets, as if ESPN were a philanthropist. Canzano continued, "The irony is that McAfee is more like Washington State than he'd ever admit." Okay, John, tell me you know nothing about sports media without telling me you know nothing about sports media. The story goes he borrowed $100 from a friend in high school, lied to his parents, entered a poker tournament, and won enough money to fund a trip to Miami for a punting showcase. He did enough to get on West Virginia University, which might as well be Washington State for the purpose of this discussion. And he goes on to talk about how McAfee's a 7th-round draft pick. You know, like, dig into his story. He likes to portray himself as an underdog kid who dreamed of living in a home with a staircase and now resides in the biggest mansion in the best neighborhood on television. Well, the only problem with that, Canzano, or Clownzano, is Pat McAfee actually does live in the biggest house with the huge staircase, and Pat McAfee is the face of sports talk in our country.
Yeah, which is why this is getting so much run, which is the other point we can't forget.
Which is why anybody cares.
Yeah.
And I got news for you. If you borrow $100 from your friend to enter a poker tournament so that you can afford to go to a punting showcase and get a college scholarship, here, let me drive you to Miami. Let me pay for the airline ticket for you. That's not something to mock Pat McAfee over. And again, it's John Clownzano, the great radio wizard of the Northwest, you know, and picking up on these comments. I totally understand it and I get it. But are you serious that you just called Washington State the kid picked last on the playground? So are you no better than Pat McAfee? Like, this is what we do in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying, hey, Pat McAfee's a great American story. He's a great American businessman. He's an entrepreneur who built a brand. Now, did he say something really stupid again? Yes, he did. But does that mean he's not a great entrepreneur? No, it doesn't. Does that mean that Pat McAfee is, you know, some kind of dreg of society? No, it doesn't. Does that take away from the fact that he was making $30 million a year from FanDuel alone on a YouTube show? No, it doesn't. No, it does not. Does that mean that Dave Portnoy just is a terrible entrepreneur because of how he treats women? No. Is he a jagbag for the way he treats women? Yes. Is Portnoy a terrible businessman? No. Is he a drag of society? Yes. Is he a terrible businessman? No. Right? Like, we tend to do this, and I don't understand it. And the last two things I'll say before we get to your comments, because you're way more important than we are. Stop shaming successful people in this country. Please, I'm begging you to stop going after people who bust their ass to build a brand and build a business and are successful, and they then say things you don't like, so we tear them down altogether. Shut up, John Canzano. If you want to go after Pat McAfee for what he said about Washington State, I'm all good with that. I'm here for that. If you're trying to go after Pat McAfee because he borrowed $100 to enter a poker tournament because he could not afford to go to a punting showcase in Miami to get a college scholarship at West Virginia, you should probably go away. You should definitely go away because there's nothing wrong with that story.
No, it's the ultimate American dream story.
And it drives me crazy that it's almost in this country taboo to be wealthy anymore. And I'm tired of hearing about it. And I'm tired of trying to tear down guys who are.
Okay.
They're
Sorry,
into the
folks,
lesson.
that's what it is.
It drives me crazy. It really is a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
That we do that. I just can't, Aaron Wilson says, I'm more important than this show. I need this validation. You are. You are far more important than this show. That's why we tell you that you should go get 6 free BuckedUp buck shots right now. You guys, we are halfway to our monthly goal. It's 4 days into the month. There's 400 people watching the show. Let's get on it right now. We need 100 people today to go and get 6 free buckshot samples right now. You get a 6-pack for free in the description of the show below. It is clean, long-lasting energy, 200 milligrams of caffeine from all natural sources, and they put that into a bottle with a bunch of really good brain food to give you a mental lift, to give you mental clarity so you can get through your day. Maybe you have a long drive. Maybe you have a pivot table or an Excel spreadsheet or a huge presentation or a big phone call you got to make. Hook it up. Bang a buckshot, and trust me when I say this. We are 24 minutes into the show. Watch the energy and enthusiasms that are straight ahead because we chose buckshot to power us through the Monty Show. Man, I'm on the blue raz trail too. I love it. Blue raz and watermelon are my 2 favorite flavors. You get them both in the sampler. Go get it right now. In the description below, just click the link, fill out the information. They'll send you 6 free buckshots right to your front door from BuckedUp Energy, the official energy provider of the Monty Show. In the description below, go hook it up. Let's get your comments in here. Who's the first one in today? Let's go all the way. We already have over 1,000 comments, so let's go all the way back to the top and see who's the first one in today. It's Jeff Woodworth.
I'm for real.
Jeff Woodworth, my guy, what's up? He
for real.
says, who knew McAfee has a problem with Cougars? Somehow I don't think that's what your point is. Conference Commissioner Gumby number 2 says Pat McMuffin. Shaner from Arizona. What's up, Shaner? Third. What's up, Kevin the Destroyer? Good to see you. Big Blue Horses. He's a former kicker. Explains quite a bit. Odd ducks. Kickers are odd ducks.
Yes.
Absolutely. Kevin the Destroyer, probably the richest kicker in history. I don't disagree with that. Absolutely. Don't disagree with that. Jeff Woodworth, welp, I asked for the dude, told me to F off. Best customer service call ever. Jeff Woodworth said, let me call the Taco Bell hotline and find out. What did I miss here? Mexican Pizza Wednesday. It is National Taco Day.
Yep.
We'll absolutely talk about that. Appreciate you guys coming in. John Teal gives us $2. Pat is like a teenager with a Porsche, a-hole. He does come off like that. And I think sports talk in this country, it's very much the same with Stephen A. Smith. It is very much the same with Skip Bayless, Jim Rome, Cowherd. You either like them or you don't. I'm sure it's like that on our show.
Right.
I mean, I don't put us in that class or whatever, but you either like us or you probably don't. I don't know. But I think everybody has a flavor. And Pat McAfee wearing a tank top and, a bro-fro and there's a lot of people I'm sure that turns off. Yeah, I'm sure.
I think every show has its own flavor. There's no doubt, and that would include us. And I think that, there's certainly some resentment for what, the heights that Pat has reached. There's some resentment for just how good, Pat has it. And I think that, I'm not one of the people, obviously being in the industry, I'm not going to sit here and say that Pat's lucky to be where he is. I think he's worked hard for a lot of years and done a lot of things and made a lot of investments to get to where he is. But the reality of the situation is there are people who think he is a sellout. There are people who think that because he got paid all that money, at FanDuel, and then, of course, ESPN, that now he feels like he's an elitist and, the show is going to change a little bit. But my opinion is I think the show has not changed that much. I think the only thing that's changed a ton is that they're just pounding ESPN talent into the show. I'm constantly getting
absolutely.
Schefter, freaking everybody
Orlovsky
and their mom on that show. And like Orlovsky is a good example. I actually like Dan. I like what he does. I respect his X's and O's game.
Are you generally an ESPN fan?
Yeah, definitely. Fox hater, ESPN fan for sure. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I just haven't been head over. I've never been head over heels with Pat, but I've never been like, man, I hate his show. I'm just sort of like, yeah, that's Pat's show. It's not bad.
Bro, what's up with the sunlight?
Bro, what is the sun shining onto you?
I just caught a glimmer of the sun in my eye. When has that started?
I guess
I
the
never
angle
get
of the
that.
sun changed.
God damn it. Well, let me just.
You scoot on over there,
I'll
man.
just sit all the way over here.
Okay.
You know.
Okay.
Dadgummit. Raider Mark, more unscripted and nonconformist take by Pat will probably have me tune in more. Really? That's interesting.
Well,
okay.
and that's one of the biggest criticisms of the older sports talk generation, right? Dan Patrick, Jim Rome certainly might be the biggest criticism of his show. Certainly Cowherd. There are many people. The next time someone DMs me and says, man, like, how could Cowherd come out with this ridiculous take? Do you really think that Colin Cowherd comes up with the dumb stuff he says? No. Dude, he's got an army behind him coming up with takes to get time on Twitter. I mean, that's what Fox does. And so, like with Jim Rome definitely feels scripted. Jim Rome's definitely a guy that is very structured in how they do the show. Very like, hey, same thing every day, 2 guests, 30-minute opening block. Like, that's how they do that show.
Well, and I can tell you, having worked on Jim's show, Jim writes all of his own stuff. He writes all of his own takes. I know people that work for Colin Cowherd. He has a staff of writers. I know people that work for Dan Patrick. He was much the same. Like, when you get to a certain level, you just have more. You have more assets. You have more resources. And a guy like Jim Rome takes a lot of pride in writing his own stuff. Now, having said that, he plugs it all into a teleprompter and he reads it, which if that's how you do you, do you. Like, I don't care about that. Like, we don't have a staff. We formulate all our own takes. I mean, like, maybe someday we will, but I don't begrudge guys for having resources.
But I think it's the feel of the show.
Yes, Colin Cowherd is canned, and he has guys that write for him. From what I understand, a guy like Jim Rome does not. A guy like Pat McAfee, I don't know that Pat himself prepares at a very high level because he does not seem to always be educated on the stuff they talk about. I watch shows like that. Obviously, working in the industry, I watch TV a little differently.
Right.
I watch ball games differently than you do. And you can tell when somebody's prepared.
Yeah.
You can tell when somebody is prepared. There's no doubt about that.
And that's my thing for Pat. It goes back to that point I was making about 10 minutes ago with ESPN and how they need to handle Pat. Pat on his show, do whatever the hell you want to do. Obviously, you got to keep it in constraints for ESPN. Okay, we get it. But generally speaking, do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
On game day, though, okay, we may not necessarily need a teleprompter and a script, but you got to have a general understanding about how far you can take it and where the line is. And I think that's the hard part for Pat because, like I was saying, he's such an in-the-moment guy. He thrives in the moment, and I love him for it, but it does come back to bite him in the ass.
Yep. I don't disagree with that at all. Let's see. U.S. Mail says only real men make good punters. Punting is not an easy job.
No.
So they need artificial stimulants to get through their own shows? No, but when you have the ability to work with a company like BuckedUp and you use a product like Buckshot, why would I not want more mental clarity?
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean by that. Let's see. Aaron Wilson, that beam of light on Monty's face is phenomenal.
It's phenomenal.
It's bright. It is. That's never.
I never thought we'd have that problem in this particular.
That is never. And there's a window wall to my left. It's never been a problem before. Never. I've never. That's bizarre. We'll have to try and figure that out. But Conference Commissioner Gumby, 1,000 likes and Monty will go live in a tank top. I mean, sure. If you guys want to try and vet that out, go for it. Everybody, make sure you hit the like button. I know that everybody likes hitting those hearts and hitting the 100s. I see every day on the show. There you go.
Light it up.
Let's go. I appreciate that. And by the way, we are rocketing towards 40,000 subs. If you are not a subscriber on the show, please consider it. We always appreciate that. Hit subscribe and give us a thumbs up. That really helps the channel grow. Let's keep reading your comments as we talk about Pat McAfee versus Washington State. Hey, Tone. Bob Kemp was the best ever, hands down. Bob is still on the radio, I think, in Phoenix. Is he not?
He is. Yes.
We used to work with Bob Kemp. Salty Drunk, what's up, my Australian friend? Isn't that what they pay Pat for? He's just staying on brand. Stop being so petty, Washington State. But I actually disagree with you, Salty.
Yeah.
I think Pat is paid to entertain. He is not paid to attack viewers. And, it's one of those things where I think College Game Day is a very different beast than the Pat McAfee Show. And it's why a lot of people criticized ESPN when they laid off a guy like David Pollack. When Gene Wojciechowski got laid off that show, and you have all these really professional analysts and journalists that were part of that show, and it really was a news and interview program, and now it has become bro football talk.
Yes.
I don't disagree with that at all, and I like Herbie, and I like Lee Corso, and Reese Davis, and all those guys. I like them, but College Game Day is not nearly as enjoyable as it was. It is no longer, and I don't know that it'll ever be, but it is no longer must-watch TV. It isn't. And this son is just owning me. This son is just up in the face.
Yeah.
Yo.
Yeah, I think the hard part is like Game Day's been the way it's been for how long? I don't even know when Game Day originated, like when it first was created or started. It's been on so long. And I think that's the thing. Like all those names you just talk about, Pat stands out from that group, both good and bad.
Yeah.
Right? Like Pat McAfee is a brand, and he's great. And I'm not even sitting here saying he does a bad show. It's not my favorite show. If you're asking me if I can listen to it, absolutely. I can listen to Pat McAfee, or frankly watch Pat McAfee, much longer than I could ever listen to Dan Patrick or Colin Cowherd, certainly, or even Jim Rome. I mean, I do like Jim's opening take more than I like Pat McAfee's show on the whole most of the time.
Yeah.
But the problem with Jim Rome's show is it gets boring, because what he does is he rolls out this fat-ass opening segment, and then he does two guests back to back, and so you're in guest mode for like an hour, and it kills it.
Yeah.
And so then I wind up on Pat, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is cool. Like I'm getting, like I love Pat when Aaron Rodgers is on. I love when Nick Saban's on. I love when I'm getting X's and O's out of Dan Orlovsky. But when Pat doesn't have guests and he doesn't have that crutch to lean on, I don't enjoy it as much. And it's the opposite for Jim. I like Jim more when he doesn't have guests. That's the hard part.
When Jim's just delivering takes, I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
All right, couple more on this. Hawkeye fan in Indy, what's up? Good to see you. When Pat took a swim in Broad Ripple Canal and was arrested, he made T-shirts that said Broad Ripple Swim Team and sold them for $20 each. Hashtag brilliant. I agree.
Yeah.
He is, and that's the thing that I think Clownzano doesn't understand. Like, you can rip Pat McAfee for a lot of things. Being a bad businessman is not one of them.
Yeah.
And I understand a lot of people don't like the tank top thing, and I totally get it. But that brand has made him hundreds of millions of dollars. And the other thing I think a lot of people don't see is it's not like he's hanging on to all his money for himself. I mean, his people are well paid. His philanthropic efforts, I mean, the guy gives away more money. Look how much money he gives away on game day, or tries to, but A.J. Hawk and those guys can't hit jump shots or kick field goals.
Because it's garbage.
They do a lot that guys like Clownzano who don't watch his show don't know about.
Yeah.
So you just blindly rip him, and it makes me crazy. It makes me crazy. Let's see. Brandon Unruh, as a Big 12 fan, I wish Washington State and OU were accepted into the conference. OSU, rather. I understand the reason against it, but I also think the reasons are overblown. Power comes in numbers, and both had good programs. Well, we covered it. If you want to go back and watch the show from yesterday and 2 days ago, like we've had extensive
strength in numbers is precisely why it didn't happen. So.
I think it's one of the major reasons. I think it's absolutely one of the major reasons. The Calford's in the ACC and not in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
I think the Big 12 is very leery of that. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I truly do. Mike Smith, Monty, close the window. You got Rudolph nose going, but it's white instead of red. The window is closed. I wish I could show you guys. The window is closed and the blinds are down.
The reason this hasn't happened before is because we were in summer, so the sun was much higher in the sky, so the angle wasn't there. Now we're in fall, the sun's a little lower, as it always does every year, and now it has that angle. So if this continues to be an issue, we will solve the problem.
Carl Adams, what's up, Carl? Canzano's story didn't show what they had in common. Pat McAfee is successful. Washington State isn't. As a business entity, Washington State is not successful. They're insolvent athletically. It's awfully difficult to argue that point, right? But John Canzano's biggest problem is he has no ability to relate. John Canzano's not successful. John Canzano's not on Pat McAfee's level. He's not. And he's tried and he's never been able to get there. So, of course, he's going to try and cut the legs out from under a guy like Pat McAfee. Like, I totally understand that. The disappointing part is he is more talented than that. Mm-hmm. Washington State is a successful athletic program. It is on the field and on the court, it is successful. TV revenue and ratings, they're not that successful. TV ratings, I mean, they're unquestioned. I don't know how you question the numbers Washington State has because they pull good TV numbers. The problem is their administration for several regimes now has not done a good job with their budgets and banked on something that was never going to come to reality with Kirk Schultz and the Pac-12 network. And it's not that Washington State is unsuccessful. Mm-hmm. They're just not smart money-wise. And now their athletic department is essentially insolvent, unfortunately.
Which is sad.
Yeah, it is. Conference Commissioner Gumby, what's up with you? Salty probably likes koala pizza.
So see what he did there? Because Salty's Australian, and the koala bear is Australian. So it's like Australian
koala
and Australian.
Pizza.
Koala pizza and stuff.
By the way, we're watching the Rays game. 7-1. Tampa is about to get eliminated, and I'm about to get piped by Randy Arozarena because I had him more 6.5 hitter fantasy points, and he's at 3. Nathan Eovaldi came through huge for me, and Randy Arozarena did not. And I am going to probably die here unless Randy Arozarena gets another at-bat, which I hope he does. I don't know that he will or not, but I hope he does because I need Arozarena to come through here.
So my prize picks took an interesting turn.
Okay.
Taylor Wall, the shortstop for the Tampa Bay Rays. I'm not quite sure what happened here, but in my prize picks currently, it says reboot. So when prize picks says reboot, either the player didn't finish the game or something happened where prize picks says, hey, we're not going to penalize you for that guy not coming through because they either left the game or something happened. So Taylor Wall is now off my ledger, which helps me. Although the problem with that is now my prize picks revert down to a lower level if I do in fact win. So, long story short, I have to have Freddie Peralta of the Milwaukee Brewers walk less than 2 guys, and I need Sal Frelick, the outfielder, to have 1 strikeout. If that happens, I win.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about mine. Nate Eovaldi, obviously Arozarena is not going to come through, but Corbin Carroll, Aaron Nola, and Zach Gallen I think are really solid. There is a Zach Gallen promo in the Prize Picks app right now for 3.5 strikeouts, which I would remind you I doubled down on, so I did get that. But, yeah, I'm going to get piped by Randy Arozarena here, so I'm not going to win the high tier. Mm-hmm. Hopefully Carroll, Nola, and Gallen all come through for me, but, yeah. I have been on a Prize Picks slide like I cannot even
you've been
describe.
On a cold streak, bro.
It has been very tough. Daniel Dixon, baseball over till next year, says Cub fans. They choked the season away, please.
Dude.
There's no reason to get – don't even bring it up. Don't even bring it up. Let's see. Koalas have chlamydia. Monkeys have herpes. And Mike Smith says, you say that like it's a bad thing, JK.
Bro, what are we doing?
What are you guys doing?
What are we doing, man?
Dakota Tubbs says Frelick. You getting a free lick out of Prize Picks tonight?
Yeah, dude. Yep.
Yeah, let's hope so.
I think I've hit it every time.
Let's hope so. Northeast Ohio Boise State fan. Like I said before, if Washington State were relevant, they'd have a conference to play in next year. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. This whole thing sucks, dude. This whole thing with Washington State and Pat McAfee, it's just unnecessary.
I don't even necessarily disagree with your point. That doesn't make what Pat did correct. That doesn't make what Pat did acceptable or the correct thing to do or any of that. We're not really, you understand, right? I just want to make this very clear. We're not talking about Washington State's situation with Pat McAfee. We're talking about Pat McAfee taking a senseless shot at the fan base for essentially no reason. That's what we're talking about. The relevancy with Washington State, we've talked about that. Go find it on the channel. It really has nothing to do, in my opinion, with Pat's comments. Pat dug himself a hole once again by speaking out of turn.
Yeah, he did.
And I think that, again, I'm qualified to speak on it. If you talk off the top of your head or you just say random stuff, typically you're going to get in trouble for that. And so Pat did that, and now he's getting the heat for it.
J.K. Marshall getting piped. Yes, I am. In fact, I am. Aaron Wilson, my picks are hitting today, as usual. Dakota Tubbs, Daniel Royals fan here. Our season was over in middle of April.
Damn.
Christopher Shannon, McAfee will get old soon. Pollock game day is what I prefer, not the stupid 35-year-old still acting like a 19-year-old freshman in college. Ouch.
Well, I don't know that he's acting like a college kid, man. I think that look, I agree. The bro talk gets old. I agree, and I think it's a great way to describe it. But in my opinion, a lot of times in sports, we like to kind of put labels on things that maybe are a little harsh, but I actually do feel like bro talk is a perfect label for what Pat has brought to game day. I mean, that's the feel. That's what it looks like. That's what it feels like. That's what it sounds like. Like, dude, that's what you've done here, Pat. And I think that, dude, the other thing that no one wants to say is Pat McAfee is incredibly talented. And the move to ESPN was to free up some time for him in a sense, where he didn't have to do all this production and all this behind-the-scenes stuff. ESPN was going to help him with that. Pat was going to bring the viewership, and it was a marriage made, in heaven. And the problem with that is that now Pat is just on the ESPN machine, right? Where, hey, doing the show 5 days a week, got to do game day. Oh, the college football playoff is coming in December, so let me get this right. Doing the show, doing game day, doing the college football playoffs. Like, it doesn't get less busy for Pat. So my point with this is that, again, it's the preparedness thing. Pat McAfee, if you're going to go on game day, a show that is widely respected by everybody, you have to be prepared. You can't just show up. And I think that's where ESPN has to step in as a business, as his gatekeeper, if you will, and say, look, Pat, we love you, dude, but this can't continue to happen. And we feel it happened because of X, Y, and Z. And Pat needs to make adjustments. And that's why I say, now I'm not watching game day for game day. I'm watching game day for Pat's next mistake, which will come at some point before the season is over, in my opinion, because he continues to do the same thing. Yeah. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Football 50 in 2 minutes. D'Amico Ryans lost his skull today over this national emergency alert system thing that happened.
Did your phone go off today?
Yeah, wait until you see that. Aaron Wilson says we all post our picks in the members-only chat, which is great. It is. If you guys hit the join button, there's 2 tiers of membership on the Showgram. You can, for $1.99, get all your comments highlighted in red. For $9.99, you get entry into our members-only chat on Instagram, which is great. And we post all of our prize picks in there. It is a really, really good time. Breaking news out of Major League Baseball. The Texas Rangers are going to the American League Division Series. They have eliminated the Tampa Bay Rays in the process, piping good old Uncle Monty. Thanks to Randy Arozarena being a complete crap bag today at the plate. Thanks for that, jerk.
Yeah, thanks.
Congratulations to the Texas Rangers moving on.
Evaldi did come through for you.
Evaldi came through. Yes, he did.
And you still have an opportunity to win.
Yes, I do. Absolutely. Let's see. Payson, Cougar fan. What's up, Payson? I remember when the World Series started in early October. Remember Mr. October? All right, happy Christmas. Game 3 in the World Series. It does. It feels like it takes forever. It feels like it takes forever. Boyd Lake, the SEO King of America. McAfee's a bit of a boob, taking shots, especially when the program is taking hits and is down in is Bush League. Program. I just don't understand it.
And I think there's no other way to spin it.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
I mean, what is ESPN going to say? Yeah, well, Pat came out on game day and took a shot with Lee Corso on Washington State fan.
Yeah, and DG, I saw this. Everybody said that, and I saw Pat talked about it on his show, that he was defending Kirk Herbstreit. It's meaningless. There was no reason. When you say what Pat McAfee said, you just don't. Why would you go after Washington State fan and tell them to shut up, Washington State? I'm sick of you wasting time on this show. And it wasn't specifically pointed at Corso and Herbstreit. His rant about the flag in 292 days. Come on, man. Come on. I like Pat McAfee, but this was a bad look by him.
Certainly, at the most minimum standard, there was a better way to go about it. If you just had to do it.
Yeah. And DJ, I get it. It was. Yeah. This is not what it was about. The tape, go watch the game day tape. It was not about defending those guys.
You know what that is? That's the spin on, hey, what happened?
Yes.
That's the, hey, well, here's actually, hey, Twitter keyboard warrior guy, I'm Pat McAfee, and here's what actually happened. No, Pat, I know what I saw. Everyone knows what they heard. And I don't care what happened on Twitter or whatever. It just is unnecessary.
It was.
Funny how before you showed up, this type of thing wasn't really happening.
Yeah, I totally agree.